Today's review is for Black Widow, the first MCU film since 2019, as well as the long-awaited spin-off film for Scarlett Johansson's femme fatale Avenger, who we all first met all the way back in Iron Man 2 and last saw sacrifice herself in Avengers Endgame, starring Johansson alongside Florence Pugh, Rachel Weisz, O.T. Fangbeli, Ray Winstone, Olga Kurylenko, and David Harbour. It takes place in between the events of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. In the character's first solo outing, Natasha Romanoff, while on the run for breaking the Sokovia Accords, discovers that the Red Room, the secret Russian women's brainwashing and training program that she used to be a part of, is still active, and reunites with some old associates in order to take it down for good, while also being hunted down by the movement-mimicking assassin Taskmaster. Now, when I heard back in either, I think, in 2018 or 2019, I don't know, that Marvel was finally going to make a solo film for Black Widow, I was pretty excited. Because ever since the character was first introduced in Iron Man 2, she's become quite an icon. Sure, at first she was mostly just remembered as the hot one, but when movies like Winter Soldier and Civil War came out, the character became much more liked as a character, and not just as sexy, badass eye candy. She actually became a character that we can legit care about, which actually made it genuinely sad when she sacrificed herself in Endgame to get the Soul Stone. But yeah, when it was confirmed that we were finally getting a Black Widow solo movie, I was really looking forward to it. And of course, it was supposed to come out in May last year, but like many other films, got continuously delayed. But now it's finally out to the public, not only in theaters, but also on Disney Plus for premiere access, which was how I saw it. By the way, unlike what I've been doing with streaming released films since Wonder Woman 84, I will not talk about the film in spoiler detail. And I might stop doing that with the other movies I see after this, so don't worry. But anyways, yeah, after a long ass year, the film is finally out for the public to see. And was it worth the long ass wait? Well, while I wouldn't say no, I wouldn't necessarily say yes either, because unfortunately, the film was just pretty average. Not bad, average. Sure, it has redeeming qualities, but overall, it's just one of the more okay films in the MCU, which is kind of disappointing in my opinion. First off, with what I liked, I of course have to give praise to Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow. She's always been great as this character, and that's indeed the case in this film as well. She has some great chemistry with the rest of the cast, particularly Florence Pugh. She's a total badass. She conveys tons of emotion and charisma very well. And overall, she's just brilliant as Black Widow, okay? She is Black Widow, if you ask me. And if this is the last time she plays the character, unless they decide to possibly make a second film, which could lead into a trilogy like other MCU trilogies, then she did a really damn good job playing her one last time. It made for a really good send-off performance. I also liked the character of Yelena Belova, the sister figure to Natasha, played by Florence Pugh. She and Natasha have a really great dynamic in this movie. Basically, again, they're like sisters to each other in the film, and you actually do buy into it. Not only did I find it amusing when they bantered from time to time, but also I liked when they had some just emotional conversations, even just friendly conversations, and it did make me care for them. There's a scene where she and Nat are sitting at a table at a restaurant, I think, and are having a couple beers, and just asking each other about how their lives have been and what they plan to do going forward. And it's just a really nice little conversation scene. And again, Florence does a great job. She also had some really funny lines, like how she often imagines some cool ways to die, or how she keeps on poking jabs at that pose that Natasha often does. At one point even doing it herself. And yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, I like Yelena as a character, and I do look forward to seeing more of her in the future of the MCU. I also enjoyed David Harbour as Alexei Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian, a Russian version of Captain America. Mostly because he provided some of the funniest humor of the movie. In fact, in some ways, he kind of gave me more of the impression of a Russian Mr. Incredible, because he's the most humorous one. He acts as sort of a dad figure to Nat and Yelena, in a more dysfunctional way though. He wears a red suit, which though I'm sure is also the case in the comics. And even though he's fat, he's still pretty damn strong. And also there's the fact that he keeps on sometimes bringing up his glory days of being the Red Guardian before he got sent to a prison. And David conveys the whole comedic super soldier dad figure pretty well, to a point where I actually wouldn't mind if we saw him again too in the MCU future. I don't even care if his Russian accent was over the top. He was pretty great. Also, the action is of course amazing, as to be expected. It's very much like how it was in Winter Soldier, or even just like any other spy movies like Mission Impossible. You know what I mean. The typical kick-ass punching and kicking and shootouts and car chases, all of that in this movie was great. Like, there's a really cool prison break scene with Red Guardian that is just really fun, as well as a great sequence at the end where a huge flying fortress is exploding and falling apart, and debris is just falling to the ground, and our characters are fighting in their fall, and it's just awesome. The MCU has always had some pretty great action sequences, and this is no exception. But now, as for things I didn't like. First off, the pacing of the film is not great. Not because it's too long, but because it's too short. This really might be one of the shortest MCU movies I've seen in a while. I don't know if I'm right on that, but it really is short. And I don't mean that as like a good thing. The overall main story of taking down the Red Room felt way too fastly resolved. So fast that it just made watching Nat confront this evil from her past much less interesting in the end. Had the movie been a bit slower and a little bit longer, it could have given the entire main goal-focused plot much more depth. But because it goes so fast, it just feels like another hard-ass day at the office. Like in the first act, Nat finds out the Red Room is still going strong, then in Act 2, she gets her comrades together, and then in Act 3, the Red Room is toppled. So when the whole Red Room stuff eventually gets resolved, it's just like...
Well, that wasn't such a chore now, was it?
Like, it was that fast. Not fast like an episode of a TV show or anything, but still way faster than it should have been in order to function as an emotional film for this character. And that's something I was severely put off by. It was way too quick. Also, let's talk about Taskmaster, played by... Now let me get something straight. This was another reason I was excited for the film. When it was confirmed that Taskmaster was going to be one of the villains, I was hyped. Because I like Tony Masters as a villain in both the Marvel comics as well as the various Marvel cartoons that I've seen. Most particularly, the Ultimate Spider-Man TV series. He's just a pretty cool villain. A skilled fighter that can copy your combat movements just by watching you. And I was really looking forward to seeing how they could adapt the character to live action. Now, I will say first that at first I wasn't a big fan of the mask they gave him. Mostly because of the big goggle eyepiece. It looked weird to me at first. But I will admit, over time, I've gotten over it. Now, I actually think it's pretty cool. Even though I still do kind of wish they gave him a full-on skull mask. But anyways, yeah, I was excited to see Taskmaster be brought into the MCU. But honestly, I was really disappointed by how they handled the character. I mean, sure, they adapt the character's abilities pretty well. We see the character use movements similar to Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Panther, Winter Soldier, Black Widow, of course, and I think at one point even Spider-Man. And those scenes are pretty great. Like, action-wise, they did Taskmaster pretty well. But like, as a character in the film, this version of Taskmaster is pretty mediocre in my opinion. Now, I don't know if it is that spoilery to say what I'm going to say next, since people are expecting it, but in the movie, Taskmaster is not Tony Masters like he is in the comics. It's a different character, and the reveal as to who this character is, in my opinion, could have worked very well on paper. But the way it's executed in the movie, especially with how they continue on with it afterwards, is just underwhelming to me. And it felt like a half-assed attempt to make the character sympathetic, which just fell flat in my opinion. It also doesn't help that the way they resolve the character ruins all hope for Taskmaster to be a part of a potential MCU Thunderbolts. Like, come on, we got Baron Zemo still up and running. They're even bringing back Abomination, and heck, for all we know, they could even bring Deadpool into the mix. But nah, they just do Taskmaster as a one-and-done thing because they need to make them sympathetic. Like, come on, man. So yeah, I was disappointed by the MCU's Taskmaster, and I definitely prefer the Ultimate Spider-Man version as well as the Spider-Man PS4 version. It was also incredibly underwhelming finding out what exactly happened in Budapest with Nat and Hawkeye. As many MCU fans expect from this film, we finally get somewhat of a look into what happened in Budapest, which was a mysterious mission event that Nat and Clint brought up in the first Avengers and in Avengers Endgame. And it was this interesting thing like, ooh, what happened in Budapest? I wonder what happened there. Must have been something pretty crazy. And in this film, we kind of do finally get an answer. And it's pretty boring, honestly. Like, it sets up the twist later, but the way they even show the story was just really lame to me. It didn't have me all, oh wow, so that's what happened. It was more like, oh, so that's what happened. Okay. Boring. And the fact that it was as lame as it was is incredibly disappointing to me. And I wish they came up with something far more interesting than what they went with. The tone of the film especially was pretty awkward at times. Like, half the time, it's an emotional story about confronting your past and forgiving your fake family, but later on, we get all these quips and jokes about how piss heats ice off of your hands. Now, I'm not saying you can't have humor in a somewhat dark movie, but you gotta balance it out properly. Like, come on, Infinity War was a dark movie, yet the humor was still funny because at least it didn't distract from all the dark stuff. Like here, it just comes off as weird when you have a scene where Alexi's wife compares him to her pet pig, which she calls Alexi, in a film where we have possibly the most bleak opening credits of any MCU film, which go to the effort of using the Malia J cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit. And that was just strange. If anything, they should have made the opening song the 2WEI cover of Toxic. Now, it probably wouldn't have fit what the opening credits show, but it would have messed with the tone of the rest of the movie a lot less. And finally, the more main villain, Drakkon, was pretty lame too. He's the guy that runs the Red Room, and the one that brainwashed all of these women into becoming mindless killers. He was actually first mentioned in the first Avengers movie. If you remember correctly, Loki brought him and his daughter up to Nat. So yeah, while it was cool that they decided to make this character the villain, in the actual film, he's just boring. Because, well, there's just nothing all that interesting about him. He's just a misogynistic, tyrannical asshole who uses women as weapons and is a generic control freak. And yeah, you want to see him get punched in the face, and also Ray Winstone does a pretty good job playing him, but like just as a character, he's really forgettable. Even though he has a personal relationship to Natasha's past, they really didn't do a good job at making him all that memorable. He's at the very least a C-level villain, if anything. So yeah, Black Widow does have a lot of great stuff. Johansson is brilliant, the rest of the cast do a great job, the action's awesome, and the music is also pretty good. But the pacing was way too fast, Taskmaster was poorly handled, the tone needed some tweaking, and heck, overall the film itself just doesn't even contribute that much to the MCU. Sure, it sets up future stuff, but tons of MCU content does that. And in terms of being the first solo film for Black Widow, it wasn't even great in that regard, to a point where I'd say Winter Soldier was the best Black Widow movie. Again, this film isn't bad at all, but it's just not nearly as worth the wait as many of us were hoping. It's passable. It's one of the more passable films in the MCU. And the fact that we had to wait a long-ass time to see it makes it even more disappointing. I will say that in terms of being the second female-led MCU film, it is better than Captain Marvel. But, come on, even that film I don't hate as much as anyone else. So, to me, that's not really saying nearly as much. I'm going to give Black Widow a 4 out of 10. By the way, if we ever do get the chance to see Red Guardian again in the MCU, what would you want to see him in? Maybe possibly the upcoming 4th Captain America movie, or perhaps even a Winter Guard movie or show, if that's possible. The Winter Guard, from what I've heard, are basically a Russian version of the Avengers, and from what I've looked into, they actually seem pretty cool. Red Guardian is a prominent member, and I think a movie or even a show about them would also be pretty cool. What do you think? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'll see you on my Loki review, and until next time, peace out!